This is an initial calibration video for the Datamax data logger. The first step is going to be installing your modules, and then installing your sensors, and then installing the wires that connect the sensors to the module. After you've done that, you should be able to fill out the Datamax configuration sheet. You will need to do this before you can move on to the next step. So the first thing we want to do is we'll fill out our actual configuration sheet. Engine RPM, drive shaft RPM, and analog A1 we physically have installed the water temp sensor, and analog A2 we physically have installed the exhaust gas temperature sensor, and A3 we have fuel pressure, and in A4 we have oil pressure. We referred to the instruction manuals to put down what type of sensor it should be listed as well as whether the RTD and the ground dip switches should be on or off. After we filled that out, we can go ahead and record a short 10-second test log file with your Datamax system. Then go ahead and open up your Datamax software. If this is the first time you've used the Datamax software, you will see the SD card setup wizard. The instructions are pretty self-explanatory. It's basically just going to try to find your SD card and memorize that location for you. So we're going to get next. Now it's asking for us to request the card, so we're going to place the SD card in. Now it automatically found the SD card for us, so we're going to go ahead and hit finish. If it did not find it, then just follow the instructions on the screen. After we have told the Datamax software where the SD card is, we can download the log file. Now to download the log file correctly, we want to hit this SD button. Doing it correctly is very important because it allows us to keep our log files organized and also allows us to keep the SD card cleared off. So you'll see here we have three different options. We can save a log file to an existing event, which right now we only have sample log files as an event. We can create a brand new event, or we can do nothing. So we're going to go ahead and create a new event. We're going to leave today's date because it keeps things nice and organized, but we're going to delete the words type new event name here, and for this we're going to type in initial calibration. And then we're going to hit the copy here directly to the right. This will tell us we've successfully copied a log file. Hit OK. What it has done now is deleted the log file off of your SD card and saved it to your computer. So your SD card is now clear, ready to record plenty of more log files. So now we have our short 10 or 8-second log file. We want to actually change the calibration based on our specific installation. And for this example, we're using this installation right here, this configuration. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edit and then Properties. This is where you can access the channel properties. This is where all the changes can be made. So the first line we have here is record. We're going to leave the record line alone because it's just a simple switch. The next line is engine. You see here we've got engine RPM 8-cylinder, so we're going to leave that alone. Next line is drive shaft. We're using a 2-magnet collar, just like our configuration here shows, so we can leave that alone as well. The next line is magneto. As you can see here, we are not using the magneto input inside the Datamax data logger. So what we're going to do is we're going to disable that channel so it doesn't log and it doesn't show it to you. To do this, follow the magneto line all the way to the right and click on the calibration button, which looks like a finger pushing a red button. You now have an option for type of sensor. We're going to select none from the top of the type of sensor drop-down list and hit OK. And you can see we now have none for the channel name of magneto. Input shaft is the next line, and as you can see we are also not using input shaft, so we're going to disable that channel as well. Find input shaft, follow the line to the right, click on the calibration button. From the type of sensor drop down list, go ahead and select none and hit OK. So now both of those channels have been disabled. Now in our configuration, I am not using either of my switch monitors. The switch monitor can monitor a trans brake coming on or a solenoid coming on or wide open throttle, something along those lines. But majority of our customers do not use the switch input, so we're going to go ahead and disable those as well by going to the none type of sensor dropdown and right here as well. Okay, so now here's where the important calibration information happens. In main module analog 1, the default is that it is indeed for water temp. If we take a look at our configuration, we do in fact have water temp installed in A1. But our sensor type is going to be the DATCON. It's the one-wire sensor. And in the calibration currently, it has got one of the different sensors. So we're going to change that calibration. To do that, click on the calibration button and from the type of sensor drop-down list, go ahead and select the DATCON 02022-00 temp. This is the calibration for any of the one-wire temp sensors. So we're going to go ahead and change the type of sensor and hit OK. The next line is main mod A2. The data logger right now thinks we have oil pressure plugged into it. But if we look at our configuration sheet, we see we actually have exhaust temperature plugged into it. So we need to change that. So we're going to come over here. We're going to click on the calibration button, and we're going to hit exhaust. From the type of sensor, we're going to select the EGT 1800 degree temperature range. Now what's going to happen is, because we already have a channel name of exhaust, when we hit OK, it's going to say this channel name is already in use. So what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily call this exhaust X. Hit OK. Now we've got exhaust, and it is the correct type of sensor that does in fact match up with our configuration sheet. So next sensor is A3. We physically have fuel pressure installed there. If we look at our sheet, our calibration, we have fuel pressure. This one is labeled as a 30 psi, whereas ours is a 15 psi. So we need to make a small change there. So we're going to click on the calibration button. From the type of sensor drop-down list, we're going to go ahead and scroll up and choose 15 psi. Hit OK. Last line is main mod A4. It thinks we have exhaust actually there, but in fact we have oil pressure and the autometer style oil pressure sensor. So we're going to click on the calibration button and change the exhaust to oil PSI. And if you have the one-wire brass oil pressure sensor, it is going to be the autometer oil. And hit OK. And now that we've changed that original exhaust channel name, we can go back to this exhaust and fix its name. So we're just going to delete that X and hit OK. The battery we can leave alone. The mile an hour, if you'd like to customize the mile an hour to give you more accurate mile an hour, click on the calibration button. Click on the calibration button again, and it's going to ask you for your tire circumference and your rear end ratio. Keep in mind this is the actual tire circumference. So you might have to use a circumference calculator or use a flexible tape measure to measure the outside circumference. After you've finished changing that, go ahead and hit OK and OK. At this point, if you have an LCD dash, we would like to configure the dash. If you don't, then you can skip ahead. To configure the dash, we're going to hit this Configure LCD module button right here. The first thing we want to do is, by default, the LCD has got 4 pages, which for the majority of our users is a little excessive. So we're going to go to page 4, and we're going to go ahead and delete page 4. Hit OK. That'll automatically take us to page 3. We don't need page 3 as well, so we're going to delete that page. This will take us to page 2. Page 2 is by default for the 8 EGTs. So in this circumstance, we do not have 8 EGTs. So we can delete page 2 as well. This will leave us with a single page, make things a little bit less confusing in the future. At this point, we now have what would be a virtual version of the dash. You've got your 4 left channels. You've got your 4 right channels. You've got your center number and your actual gauge dial, which both of these we want to leave as engine. But since we have some sensors in here we don't really need, what we can do is we can move oil over here, and we can actually select blank. So instead of showing sensors we don't have, it will simply just not show anything in that area. And you can completely customize where these show up. You can have them show up in multiple places. The sky is the limit when it comes to this. So once you get your LCD page configured, go ahead and hit OK. Now what we want to do is we want to send the calibration to the data logger. Now keep in mind that the calibration information that we just changed right here, it is actually not saving it so much to the SD card, but it is actually saving it to the Datamax data logger itself. So the Datamax data logger, every time it records a log file, it has that little calibration at the beginning of it. So it doesn't matter which SD card you use, as long as it's one of ours, or which computer you save the log file to, it will always have this custom information. So what we want to do now is go ahead and send the calibration back. So hit send config to Datamax via SD card. It's going to ask you if you want to set your hardware clock. If you are close to your Datamax data logger, then we can say yes. If you are not, then say no. Essentially, the SD card has no internal clock. So for every second it takes you to get over to the car, as a second it does not know how it has passed. So if you wait 5 minutes, your clock's going to be 5 minutes slow. I'm pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, and then hit OK, and OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and take the SD card over to my computer, my Datamax data logger, place the SD card in, wait about a minute, and you are good to go. Usually I would recommend recording another short 10-second log file to verify that your calibration is correct. Or if you do have the LCD dash, it should be pretty obvious that you now have your custom settings. If you have any problems, feel free to give us a call anytime at 1-800-870-8383, or you can reach us 24/7 at our tech line at 301-884-5718. Thank you very much.